Hello everyone, we are here today speaking with Marion about a Rotary Scholarship that took him to Venezuela on a gap year between high school and college, where he was able to practice his Spanish, live in an immersive environment, and attend high school and college, and we're going to hear all about the experience. Firstly, I want to thank Marion for being here. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Welcome.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do? What did you study?
I'm presently a high school Spanish teacher. I'm about to finish my 16th year in the field. I went to Temple University and did a double major in Spanish and linguistic and cultural anthropology. Temple University, for those of you who don't know, is located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the city of brotherly love. So I was blessed with the opportunity to be accepted into the honors program at Temple again, where I did a double major in Spanish and linguistic and cultural anthropology. Went directly into a graduate program where I completed a master's degree in education with a specialization in curriculum planning and second language instruction. Beyond that, I actually attempted to start a second master's degree in España.
And all of this is an effect of this wonderful Rotary Scholarship that you went on. Now, how did you hear about it?
Well, interestingly, when I was a junior in high school and was told that we would have a very special assembly, inbound students who were from foreign countries were in our town, and they would be coming to our school to do a very special assembly to talk about their respective countries and how they could share their personal experiences that they had as young adults in their respective countries with the youth in our school. At the end of that assembly, information would be provided for students to possibly pursue a similar endeavor. It was very captivating to me because I was taking foreign language in high school. At that year, I was in Spanish 4. I was really enjoying the immersive experience of just the unique nature of the class. My teacher did not speak in English. It was something very fascinating and intriguing for me.
Can anyone do the Rotary Scholarship?
The application process was very unique in that you needed to have a pretty high grade point average to even be considered. And then once the application was completed, there was a panel of interviews. And then after the interviews, you had to be put into a pool, and depending on your overall score, that would be the determining factor as to whether or not you would be accepted. I was one of the fortunate individuals who was accepted.
However, you had mentioned to me previously that the Rotary Scholarship is only accessible to those schools who are inside of a Rotary Club. Can you touch a little bit on that?
Many boroughs and many towns actually have Rotary clubs. When you find out that your town actually has a Rotary Club, that is the entity you need to contact to then facilitate the whole process and move forward in a productive way. Having that Rotary contact is the critical component to starting the process.
What about the application process? Did you get help with that?
Actually, I didn't. The application process was pretty lengthy, but I just read each page with a critical eye. I do recall having had to write about 5 very specific essays. They really wanted to know what type of thinker you were, what type of global outlook you had as a young adult, and what they could anticipate you contributing to the Rotary program as a representative from the U.S. abroad, so people could get a really authentic, genuine point of view.
So it was like an ambassadorship.
Absolutely, that would be a really good synonym for the program. And while I was there were other students from a program called AFS and Youth for Understanding that were very similar, comparable programs to the Rotary Exchange, which basically had a very similar initiative, a very similar platform.
Did you already speak Spanish before you went to Venezuela?
Well, interestingly, I am a quarter Dominican and 3/4 African American. Even though I have that in my bloodline, the Hispanoparlante, I did not speak any Spanish at home. My very first immersive Spanish experience was when I was in the 8th grade. I really feel compelled to reach out to my 8th grade Spanish teacher. I actually ran into her after coming back from the program and thanked her for planting this seed that germinated this interest in foreign language and wanting to excel in world languages. And it all came from her passion, and her enthusiasm with which she taught our class. I started Spanish in the 8th grade. Just was absolutely fascinated by her pedagogy, her approach to teaching, how she set up her lesson plans, how we worked with these thematic units. So the classroom was literally set up into different thematic units that were reflective of each chapter in the textbook. And I just would go into the room and think, wow, what are we going to learn today? Where are we going to be today? El supermercado, el parque, la biblioteca, la sala de clase. I always thought, where are we going to be? Because she would literally create this anticipatory set where we would be launched into this context. So it was very special. So starting in the 8th grade, I started to take Spanish and flourished in the class because it was just of such tremendous interest to me. I thoroughly enjoyed it and continued with Spanish all the way to the last level, which was AP in high school. It was just a wonderfully transformative experience for me because I felt myself really connecting with the language, the culture, the grammar, just the intrigue and the mysticism of the language, because obviously it wasn't English, and learning the vocabulary, learning the grammatical structures really spoke.
I'd like to speak about the immediate challenges that you faced upon making the transfer and moving countries when you went to Venezuela.
I distinctly remember the day I left, and probably the week before I left. I had never traveled alone. I had never been out of the country. I had traveled with my family to various states.
How old were you when you did that? Because that's kind of a critical point here.
Oh, thank you. I was, I believe, 18 years old. I had to get my passport, suitcases, and there was a bit of anxiety, but I don't want to misconstrue the anxiety with excitement. I think the idea of the unknown, knowing that I would be going abroad and meeting these new people, being told that I'd be living with 3 different families, going to school to repeat my senior year, there was a bit of maturity that I did bring to the experience, but I believe it was intertwined with a bit of anxiety, excitement, thrill, curiosity. I was highly curious just to see what was going to unfold and how the experience would develop.
You stayed with a host family, stayed with 3 host families. Did you experience culture shock?
I definitely experienced culture shock. I distinctly noticed how segregated the city was where I lived, and how there was definitely a very visible shift in socioeconomic status.
I'm sorry, which city?
San Cristobal en el Estado de Táchira. In the west, on the frontier of Colombia. It was just really fascinating because when you think of indigence, when you think of poverty, when you think of people who claim to be struggling, if you will, socioeconomically in the States, you see many people have automobiles, many people have running water, many people have electricity, they have a roof over their head. These things that people take for granted in our society. However, when I saw people living in a state of indigence as an 18-year-old, driving from the airport with my host family to their very nice home, I immediately noticed, clearly I was looking out the window trying to take in everything because I was just so hypnotized by being in this new country. I saw a level of poverty with people literally walking with rags tied around their feet as shoes, and rags tied around their groin area as their pants or shorts. The water in the local river was very dirty. People were there bathing, putting water in buckets that I assumed they thought to be potable. It really took me aback because I clearly noted that this was poverty, but the level of poverty that I was exposed to very early on really took me aback. That immediately had an impact on me, going from the airport through these local towns to the center of this area where I was staying with my first host family, which was the polar opposite of what I drove through coming from the airport. That definitely was a transition, just noting the level of poverty and then noting this distinct shift when it came to opulence and decadence when I noticed where they lived. And as an 18-year-old who really didn't have the perspective and the exposure to very distinct lifestyle shifts coming from the US, where we obviously have many different ways of life and different...
We have lots of benefits in the US.
Absolutely. Launching to the end of my experience, I definitely realized that people can be very wasteful. People can take things for granted here in our country. Don't realize how privileged we are to have access to so much, how wasteful people can be with throwing out food, letting the water run for many minutes before even stepping in the shower or brushing your teeth and having the water running, when I actually was told that that really wasn't appropriate. Just noticing people living in open-faced shacks with a piece of tin as a roof. Seeing that at that age, it just really took me aback and made me realize, wow.
The educational method in Venezuela, compare that to in America, because you did a little bit of high school and then you were able to observe university as well. Tell us
Correct. I did feel like early on, my experience in the high school, I thought it was going to be a high school. However, it turned out to be a K through 12 experience. However, one of the most notable points of the school was that we did have different classes on our rosters. However, we stayed in the same room for the entire day. The teachers changed. We did not shift and go into different classes like many students in the schools in our country do, in our society. When we would take assessments, the grades would literally get posted on the wall. So you would see everyone's scores for the assessments, and having confidentiality or taking people's privacy into consideration was not something that was a part of their academic culture. They really didn't care if you were the lowest in the class.
What about the university experience? You were there in an observative capacity, right?
The mother of my third host family was an accounting professor at La UNED, the university in el Estado de Táchira. So I was given the opportunity to go to La UNED 5 months into my stay. That completely changed the academic experience. I was able to go to the university with her, sit as an oyente, which, as you said, was in the capacity of an observer, where I could just take notes and be a non-matriculated student, essentially amassing information that was given in the target language, having a chance to be around people around my age. And it was a completely different culture and feeling in that institution, which I preferred. I do distinctly remember taking a class in chemistry, learning the chemical symbols and the language and lexicon used in a chemistry class, but in the target language was definitely a challenge because I had never been exposed to those words before. So,
cuéntanos una anécdota sobre tu experiencia en Venezuela.
Yo recuerdo una noche cuando me desperté, salí de mi dormitorio y bajé de la escalera y estaba gritando, "Ay, tuve un sueño en español, tuve un sueño en español." Basically meaning I had a dream in Spanish. That was the third month of my experience there. And my host parents were so excited and they told me that's a sign of becoming bilingüe. Me sentía bien orgulloso y me sentía como si fuera una esponja absorbiendo mucha información cada día, which basically translates to I felt as if I was a sponge absorbing a great deal of information every day. An affirming moment for me because hearing the language everywhere in the grocery stores, el supermercado, en la casa, la televisión, y en cualquier sitio, every other place I was going, I heard the language and it was so hyper immersive where you couldn't get away from it. It definitely benefited me exponentially and it accelerated that whole cognitive experience with absorbing the language, immersing myself in the language, and having to do practically every fathomable move I made in that experience in the language because it had become my world.
So the next question, the best and the worst parts of studying in Venezuela. Anything else that you'd like to add?
The opportunity to be exposed to a language in an authentic context. People, when they have language learning opportunities in the States, they often have it for one period, and then they go off and do the rest of their classes in English or in that respective language. What I realized is that having a chance to have the language given to me in a classroom setting, however, in a life setting, every day, every move I made was an immersive experience in the language. That was the gift that basically served as a foundation upon which I built and continue to build a profession, a career as a foreign language teacher.
Did you know before going that you wanted to be a Spanish teacher?
It definitely nudged me in that direction. Prior to going, I had initially been accepted to university with an anticipation to do a double major in international business in Spanish, to work in the comercio exterior, to work overseas, perhaps for a company that had a branch in a Spanish-speaking demographic. However, when I came back to the States, when I entered the Spanish classes, the classes were just so diverse in terms of the offerings, with cinematic studies, with anthropological studies, with linguistic studies, and it just opened up a world of intrigue and fascination and interest to me that led me down the path toward education. Because many of my classmates, mis compañeros de clase, were all Spanish majors or wanted to work in translation, be professors, and or teachers. I said, maybe this is what I need to be doing. I guess there was just this innate passion and seed inside me that would ultimately germinate and manifest as a teacher. Going abroad and participating in this experience, I think, just gave me the framework to do that. It led me to finishing a linguistic and cultural anthropological major with the Spanish language major, which ended up being the double major in the undergraduate program.
Very interesting. Anthropology and Spanish.
Yes. It was more so based on culture and language, because obviously there are different subsects and facets under the umbrella of the studies of anthropología. What I took from that experience is that what I learned in the Spanish classes really shaped my university experience. I thought this makes perfect sense to move into that space as a Spanish teacher, because it would give me an opportunity to use what I learned from my abroad studies coupled with the offerings that were given to me in education and bridge the two.
What would you recommend to someone who's thinking of doing the same? How can they prepare themselves?
When I reflect on where I was in my state of maturation at that time as an 18-year-old, you have a very specific worldview. You are still developing. Your level of consciousness, introspection, selflessness can vary between how you view experiences in life, your experiences, aiming towards self-actualization. It's a very unique experience to even entertain if you are an emotional, fragile person and you think that's going to help you come out of your shell. If you are a very confident person and have this adventurous side and want to expose yourself to another culture, another language, another way of life, it's really contingent upon taking the time to take a step back and just really do a lot of self-assessment and self-analysis, determine what you want from such an experience, because it is definitely a unique experience. There were highs, there were lows, there were moments of being homesick where you felt like you really were lost and confused and frustrated. Initially, I remember just feeling very overwhelmed due to the celerity with which people spoke and the harshness of their accents. It's just about really understanding the critical importance of being malleable, having an open mind. Just because you may do something one way in your country and it's done differently in another country, it doesn't make it worse, it doesn't make it better, it makes it simply different. I use some of my teachable moments that I experienced as an exchange student and really give them authentic experience so they can make those cultural connections. La importancia de crear unas juxtaposiciones culturales entre idiomas and create those cultural juxtapositions transitions in between languages, having been a part of the Rotary program, which definitely was a critical foundational component of my being.
It sounds like it made you into a global citizen.
Very well stated, because that was the very first time, again, I had left the country. When I returned to the States, I was very eager and anxious to start to explore more places overseas, in particular places under the Spanish-speaking diaspora, that would enable me to have access to different cultural experiences from people who spoke the language. Fast forward, having been to España now, I believe 12 times, Costa Rica, Colombia, Puerto Rico, La República Dominicana, just to name a few, it's been really, really special to take from these experiences, continue the language learning process, just really evolving, taking those experiences back to the classroom, grow, become a stronger global citizen.
Excellent. Very well put. Well, I want to thank you for being with us today and sharing that experience with us about the Rotary Scholarship. Thank you very, very much, Marion.
Le agradezco por haber dado la oportunidad de hablar con usted.
Ha sido un placer tenerte con nosotros hoy y hablar sobre esto en español y inglés.
Muchísimas gracias.
We've just heard from Marion about his Rotary Scholarship experience. If you want to know more about that scholarship, find out from your high school if your school is part of a Rotary Club. If they are, then you can try the application process. As you can see, you can go to many different countries. Venezuela, in this case, I understood that you could go to other places as well on this scholarship and spend a gap year abroad, which is an eye-opening experience, as we have learned very much from all of these interviews that we've been talking to people from different areas. Please remember to like and subscribe if you liked this video, and hit the notifications buttons so that you can get all of our new videos every time we pull them out. Thanks again. Bye-bye.